we get to know you as well. All right. So I don't know, but does anybody here already know how to program? Maybe even if not in Python, you know some sort of programming in some sort of programming language. You can unmute yourself and then share what your experience is so far. Okay, so then it's safe for me to assume that we are all practically beginning, right?
So me, yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, cool. Um, and please, did all of you also watch the video that I sent so that, I mean, I'm assuming you've gotten to the point where you've actually installed Python on your computer, right? If
Yeah.
anybody hasn't done that, please unmute yourself and let me know. Because the way I will go about it depends on if we all have the setup. If we all have the setup on our local machines, I will teach you in one way. If we don't, there is something else online that we can use so that we don't have to wait for people to set up their computers.
Um, yeah, I watched all the video.
I have not.
Okay. Okay. All right. So,
I haven't watched all the video, but I've got Python set up on my machine.
okay. All right.
Well, I have watched the first thing you asked us to watch, and I've done the setup.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So, just so that I'm able to appeal to those who have set up and those who haven't set up, I will start and show briefly how some things can be done for those who have set up. And then I'll move on to some online tool that we can all access. But eventually, I will put everything together and then
They
we'll
are
go.
one.
Hey,
It means
Okansi.
Nancy and the sister. That's right. Oh, it's truly.
Okay. All right, Charlie. Charlie, nice to see you here, Cry. Okay, then I'm going to share my screen and then we'll start. So I'm going to share my entire screen. Okay. So I'm going to teach you a programming language called Python, okay? And I'm sure, I mean, you have the question like, why Python in the first place? Why not any other programming language? I made this choice because Python code looks almost like English. It is very easy to learn and it is also very expressive. I program in about 9 programming languages, and I can say I do not lack in any one of them. The language I use depends on the problem I'm solving. But over the years, I've seen that Python is the easiest to teach to people because all the other languages have some cryptic things that can really get you discouraged if that is your first programming language. But the beauty about programming is once you've learned one language, I don't know, for me, it feels like I said you can speak Chi, right? And then when somebody speaks Fante, you understand. When somebody speaks Bono, you also understand, even though that's not your language. So if I decide that I want to speak Bono, it's just a matter of dedicating myself for maybe 2 weeks to learn Bono itself, and then I can transition from there. That's how programming for me is. So you really have to focus on getting the foundations right because there are certain things that cut across all programming languages, and once you get that thing right, um, it's just a matter of buying any book and then reading. Okay, Nana Harrison, please go with your question.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's
I
fine.
just wanted to find out if this meeting will be recorded.
Yeah, I'm recording it and I will
Alright,
put it
okay.
on YouTube. I'll call it TID Python session so that those who didn't join can also watch it later. Or even if
Okay,
you are
alright,
here and you
thank
want
you.
to rewatch, that's fine. All right. Okay, so just 5 minutes to explain something, then we get our hands dirty already. So when we talk about programming, is all about writing a logical sequence of instructions for the computer to follow to achieve a specific task. And the key word here is logical, right? The computer is it is a fast machine. It is fast at doing things. Like the computer can do millions of things per second, which humans cannot do. But it's also, for the lack of a better word, a very stupid machine, in the sense that if you can write code to tell the computer to burn itself, it will gladly burn itself. It doesn't have intelligence like human beings. Okay, forget about all the artificial intelligence AI stuff you are hearing. Even that kind of intelligence is not the human kind of intelligence. And so if you want the computer to do something, you, the human being, have to understand precisely the step by step actions that needs to be taken to achieve that goal. Otherwise, you cannot instruct the computer to do it. Like I said, it is a very dumb computer, but it's very fast. So if you give it wrong instructions, it will do it very fast in a very short time. If you give it the correct instructions, it will also do it very fast in a very short time. And so when you are writing your code, you have to make sure that it is logical. And the logical here is not logic in also the human sense of logic, logic within the context of the problem that you want to solve, right? And then you might ask yourself, why do we need programming languages in the first place? And the answer is that the computer is a hardware. At the core of it is a lot of pieces. I have some here, but it's not beneficial if I show it to you. There are some components called transistors, and these transistors can be used to form circuit that can either be on or off. This is the foundation of everything. Whether your word processor, the game you are playing, the video Zoom that we are using here, my audio that you are hearing, everything is represented as zeros and ones inside these transistors. So it's a state, right? So before programming became a thing, people actually had to sit to use wires, like you move wires around to instruct the computer to do things. And as you can imagine, it was very cumbersome. So they had to come up with a more repeatable way and less error prone approach to programming. And so they came up with something called machine language. And actually, even now, any code that you write ends up being machine language. Okay, machine code is zeros and ones. If I open some for you to see, it will not make any sense. It's the computer that understands it. And that was still cumbersome for human beings to do. So they came up with another programming language called assembly language. And assembly language was using what is known as mnemonics. So instead of using zeros and ones to tell the computer that add two numbers and put the answer here, you use mnemonics like add or move, those kind of stuff. It became more closer to the human and a bit farther away from the computer. But the question still remains, okay, if the computer only understands zeros and ones, and we humans are not good with dealing with zeros and ones, how do we get to instruct the computer? And I will pose this question back to you to think about it. Let's say you speak only Frafra. You are from the north and you find yourself all the way down the southern part of Ghana, where I'm from. Let's say you are somewhere in Nzema, and the only language you can speak is Frafra, and you find yourself in Nzema land. You need to communicate with people. The Nzema people also do not understand Frafra, so then both of you cannot communicate, right? But if you find a middle person who understands Frafra and Nzema, then what happens is the Frafra guy will speak Frafra to this middle guy, and the middle guy will speak Nzema to the Nzema guy. Now the Nzema guy will reply to the middle guy in Nzema, and this bilingual guy will speak Frafra to the other guy. And this is exactly what is happening here. So Python code looks like English, but that is not what the computer sees. This thing it applies to every programming language, whether C, C++, Java, Rust, PHP, whatever language you are using. The language itself has its syntax and semantics. And then these syntax and semantics are basically rules or protocols that you need to follow to be able to express yourself in the language. When you finish, there is a tool called the compiler or the translator, depending on the type of programming language, which I will explain very soon. For now, suffice it, let me say a compiler. What the compiler will do is it is going to take your source code, and this source code is the test that you have written. Okay, I'm timing myself. Within 5 minutes we'll start. So the source code that you've written, you pass it through some other software called a compiler, and this compiler will translate your source code into the needed zeros and ones that the computer is going to execute eventually. Okay, and I made mention of either a compiler or a translator. They are similar but also very different in terms of how they work. So if you take a language, like when a language says it is a compiled language, what it means is that you write your code in some text following some syntax and semantics, and then this compiler will take your test, compile everything down to zeros and ones, and give you an executable file. So if you're on Windows, you see .exe file. If you're on a Linux or Mac like mine, it will not even have an extension, but it's binary format. So if you open that thing in a text editor, it looks like nonsense, gibberish. You can't read it. It is different from your source code, but it is a translation of what you did in the source code, which the computer will understand to be able to carry out exactly what you told it to do from your source code. This is a compiler. Now, a translator also does kind of like what the compiler does, but a translator will actually take your code line by line. So you see, a compiler will take your code from start to finish, make sure that everything is correct before it produces the exe for you. A translator, and an example of a language that uses a translator is Python. It will not look at your code from start to finish before it will start executing it. It will be executing it on the fly, so line by line. It will take line one. If there is an error in a particular line, it will fail. But if it were a compiled language like C, C++, Java, Rust, C#, then what will happen is if there is an error in your code, the compiler will not even compile at all to provide the executable. So there is some kind of trade-off here. There is some kind of safety in compiled languages. It doesn't mean translated languages are wrong. Trust me, serious things are being done with Python, especially all the AIs that you are doing, all the AI stuff I do in Germany, we are using Python. Your chat GTP, your Google search, your recommender engines, and all those things, they are sitting on Python. So already I'll tell you to stay away from technology fight. People do that a lot. Hey, this language is better than this. No, it is actually a sign of somebody who doesn't know his trade, because they said if the only tool you have in your hand is a hammer, then every problem appears to you as a nail. There are some problems you need to chisel. There are some problems you need to knock. There are some problems where you have to weed. But there are people, they've learned just one language. They'll use it for everything. And then they are, bent on saying, yeah, this is the best language. There's no such thing on earth. Every language has its strength and its weaknesses. And the more languages you know, I think the humbler you become, and also the more flexible and open-minded you become. So that's just it. Now, I mentioned something about syntax and semantics. When we say the syntax of a programming language, it's just the rules that governs. Yeah, Nana, please go with your question.
Sorry. So with what you just said, normally people sort of pride themselves being a front-end or a back-end developer. So by this, are we then confined to being a back-end developer then?
Okay. So the truth is, even in these specializations, there are a myriad of tools that you can use. Okay. So the essence of my statement was that, yes, you definitely have to choose what you want to do. Whether you want to be a back-end engineer, you want to be a front-end engineer, or you want to be a full-stack engineer. Regardless of which one you choose, there are a myriad of tools that are available. So you have to indulge yourself in learning all of these. It improves the quality of things that you can do. For example, if I decide to be a front-end engineer, yes, JavaScript is dominant in that space. But even in JavaScript, there are a lot of frameworks. There is Angular, there is Vue.js, there is React.js, now there is Net.js, there is Meteo.js. Do you get my point now? So you don't just So once you get it, that's fine. Okay, cool. So
Okay.
the syntax of a language is just a set of rules that governs what constitutes a correct statement in that language. English also has syntax. I can't say I didn't did it. it is wrong in English, right? So it's part of the syntax of English that subject verb must agree. And when you are doing things in the past, there is a way you have to say it. These are syntax of the English language. Every programming language also has its syntax. Usually these are some characters, how we have to structure things, which we will learn about very soon. And the semantics are the meaning of these correctly constructed statements that you have come up with following the syntax. So if you are reading anywhere, you say, okay, this is the syntax and semantics of the programming language. It's just what constitutes correctness in that language and how do we interpret the things that we deem to be correct. That is basically it. All right, now let's get our hands dirty. For those of you who have already, sorry, I need to take water. For those of you who already have Python installed on your computer, if you open command prompt, I'm on Mac, but if I say terminal, it's the same thing as command prompt on Windows. So if you open command prompt, I have opened my terminal here, and then you type Python. In the videos, I showed you how to install Python 3, so I'll put Python 3 here. Is the font size legible enough? Can everybody see it well?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. So if you type Python 3 in the terminal, on Windows, maybe it can be Python. The reason why on Mac is Python 3 is there already is Python 2, and I've installed Python 3, so I need to tell it which one to open. But regardless, if you type Python, it doesn't work, type Python 3. If it still doesn't work and you believe you have installed Python, then you didn't do something. I can show you later. Regardless, I'll show you some few things here, and then we'll move to some online tools so that all of you who have not set up can still follow what I'm doing. Then later you can set up Python on your computer. And by the way, please, this Zoom is not paid, so I think after 45 minutes it goes off. I'll start it again and then we rejoin. All right, so if you type Python like this, you can see that your command prompt is going to change, like the way it looks, and there is this 3 greater than signs here. This basically tells you that you have entered into Python, like you have started a Python interpreter. So at this point, we call it REPL, read, execute, print, loop. Okay, Python will take Python instructions from you and execute it right away. For example, I want to see what is 23 times 23. I just type 23 times 23. I hit enter. And then Python tells me 23 times 23 is 529. Okay. This thing I did here is Python code. It looks like English. Maybe it's the times that we use the asterisk that might look funny. But this is a Python statement. Okay. So what is happening here is anytime you see those 3 greater than signs, Python says, I'm ready, give me an instruction. I will do it, and then I will print the answer for you to see. So I just asked the 23 times 23, and then it gave it to me. This is basic mathematics. There are few things I will show you here, and then we'll move on to the tool that I'm talking about. There are 2 things we cannot do away with in any programming language. The first one is being able to print something to the screen. And the second one is being able to take something from the keyboard. Mind you, every program that you interact with, there is some output and there inevitably is going to be some input. Okay, so what is happening here is every programming language gives you some instructions that will help you to print something to the screen and some instruction that you use to receive something from the user as well. So in Python, not surprisingly, the instruction that you use to print to the screen is called print. This is what makes Python nice to learn. If I try to do the same thing in C or C++, it's something else altogether. Most of you will leave the meeting right away but in Python it is just print. Okay, so if I do, let's say, print, you type print, and then most of these instructions, they take what is known as argument or parameters. Argument or parameters usually are used interchangeably, but technically there is some difference in them. I will tell you some weeks down the line. So you give that instruction print, but what should it print? So that thing that it should, that thing that the instruction should have an effect on is what is known as the argument or the parameter. Here we just want to say, hello, that we are learning Python programming. Okay, so you bring brackets, so bracket open, bracket close, and inside it you put in quote. So quote is like the computer should quote what you are putting in there, and that is what it has to print. Okay, so I'm going to say print hello dad, hello dad, we are Python programmers, something like this. If I hit enter, you see that Python saw that I wanted it to print out something. So what did I want it to print? I wanted it to print hello dads, we are Python programmers, like you can see here, and it has done exactly that over here. Okay, now maybe let me pause and take questions before I continue. Please, at this point, if anybody has any question, there is no bad question in this situation, so feel free, ask me any question at all. Otherwise, I will assume that we are all understanding this very well. Mr. Jonathan, are you understanding? Jonathan Bwampon.
Someone said they are waiting to be allowed into the meeting room.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Which link are they using? Because all those who have requested to join, I have accepted for them to be here. Yeah. We are 9 here, and I don't see anybody trying to join. So the person should just make sure they have the correct link. That is what I would say. Okay, so I assume we all do understand up to this point. All right, I think somebody wants to join now. Now I can see. Yes. Okay, so the question might be, okay, so is this how we write Python programs? No, this is one way of using Python, but in reality, the way we use Python is we write our code in a test file, and then we execute this test file so that we will have sequences of instructions in there. Okay, so if you want to quit the Python interpreter, like you've opened it like I showed you, and then you are seeing these 3 greater than signs, you want to quit, you type quit, you do open bracket and then close bracket, and now you can see that we are out of Python, and so we can begin to learn the actual way we write code in Python. Okay, so I'm going to change to my desktop here, and then I'm going to create a file. So my desktop is, let me hide these ones. So my desktop is right here, this place, and I'm going to create a folder here called TID, and then inside it we put our Python files. Okay, so I'm going to do mkdirtid, and this one is not Python, this is basic command line instructions. If you've watched my first 10 videos, I taught all these ones there. This is not Python, this is like basic computer skills. So I create a folder called TIDs on my desktop, which is here. I could also have just right click and selected new folder, but since I'm in the terminal, so I'm going into the TID, and then I'll create a file called main.py. By the way, all Python files have the extension .py. Okay, so that is one way that your test editor is going to associate the code in there with Python. So I do this. It means when I come to TID folder, there should be a file called main.py, okay? Now, at this point, I'm going to use my text editor to edit, like to write some code in there. And your text editor might be different from mine. There's absolutely no problem. The only requirement here is that it is not rich text format. Rich text format is anything you do with Microsoft Word, okay? Those full grade document processing software, you can't use that to write code because they add some hidden characters that confuses your interpreters and your compilers. So never use Microsoft Word to write code. But something like gedit, Visual Studio Code, there is Atom, there is a gazillion text editors out there. I am using Visual Studio Code. And by the way, if you want Visual Studio Code, if you go to Google and then you search for VS Code, like I'm doing here, this is what I'm talking about. It's a free text editor from Microsoft. So you just download it, you install it, and then you can program in 1,000 programming languages because there are plugins to support each programming language. So now I want to open the main.py file in Visual Studio Code. So I just did code dot. Again, this is basic computer knowledge. If you watch the first 10 videos, you see it. I want us to focus on Python. Okay, so now I'm in here. I have opened my file main.py. Let me increase my font size a bit. And please let me know if it's not so legible so that I can make it better. So we come in here and then we are going to do the same thing we did. We are going to print some statements. So I'll just say print and then I'll put it here. Let's say hello world. And then I'll come again. I'll say print I am now a programmer. Okay. If you do this, all you have to do is to save your file. On Windows, Control S. On Mac, Command S. So you do this, and basically line 1 is saying Python should print hello world. Line 2 is saying it should print I am now a programmer. So it will print hello world, it comes to the next line, and it will print I am now a programmer. Let's okay, so the meeting ends in 10 minutes, then we will have to reconnect. Okay, so I come to my terminal and all I have to do is I say Python 3 main.py. Remember, initially I just typed Python 3. If you type just Python without any file name, you are basically telling Python to start in interactive mode. But if you type Python with a file name, then you are saying the Python interpreter should read line by line the content in this file and execute them. So if I hit enter, now you see that exactly what we did here. I said it should print hello world, so it has printed hello world here. And then I said I am now a programmer, so it has printed I am now a programmer over here. Okay, any question? Because from this state going, it is going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. So if anybody has any question, please let's have it now, or you understand everything. Okay, I will assume that we all understand everything then. All right, so we go on to a concept in programming called variables. Okay, it is very, very important because it allows you to store some data in the computer's RAM, the memory, so that you can reuse it. There's somebody wants to ask a question. Please go ahead. Okay, all right. So variables are constructs in any programming language, and what I'm saying is, no matter what programming language you choose to learn, you will come and meet the concept of variables. Okay, it helps you to store data in the computer's memory so that you can later reuse it. Okay, Think of it as your post office addresses. If you give me your post office address, I can post something and they'll come and put it there. And you can also go there and then you come and take it. The memory I'm talking about here is your computer's RAM. Okay, the one people say, oh, my computer has 8 gig of RAM, 16 gig, 32 gig of RAM. This is actually the place where your instructions themselves are going to be stored. So when Python loads the program, these print hello world, blah, blah, blah. The interpreter will convert it to some machine format, put it in some RAM, and then the processor will start reading from there. In the same way, we can also put our own data there. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. Let's say to use a variable, you just put a variable name on the left. You bring the equal to character, and then whatever you want to put in that variable on the right. Okay, so let's say I want to print my full name. I will say full name. And by the way, just because I want to print my full name doesn't mean I should call the variable full name. Python doesn't care how you call your variables, just that because your code is going to be read by other human beings, it is better you choose descriptive variable names so that when people see it, they will understand what you intend to do with that variable. Okay, so I declare a variable here, full name, and I say is equal to, my full name is Edward Pai. So I just do this, and then I say print full name. See the difference between this style of printing and the first one. The first one, I put what I wanted to print in quote. If you put something in quote, Python will say, okay, you want to print exactly what you have put in the quote. But if the thing is not in quote, Python will say, okay, you want me to go to some memory location, go and read the content there and print it. So look, on line 1, we are telling the computer that go into the RAM, okay, somewhere in the RAM. And the reason I'm saying somewhere in the RAM is it is the operating system that is going to assign this location to the variable. You do not determine the address of this variable in the computer's memory. So I'm saying go somewhere in your RAM that is free and put in the value Edward Pai. For this particular side of the RAM, call it full name in my program. Okay, the reason is good for you to assign names. We'll see it very soon. The computer actually assigns some addresses. These addresses are numeric and you can't remember, they don't look nice. So the programming language gives you the ability to choose your own name. So it's like go into some section of the RAM that has enough capacity to store the test Edward Pai. The reason why I put it in quotes is test Edward Pai. And then this location where you have put Edward Pai, in my code, I will always refer to it as full name. Okay, so it's like you've bought a land in the RAM. It's the same way you can buy a land in Accra, and as long as land commission demarcates and says this land belongs to you, it belongs to you. It's the same thing that is happening here, just that there are no chiefs here to sell the same plot of land to multiple people. The operating system doesn't allow that. So it's like my program will put data in this address and some other program will come and put no. The operating system is a very honest chief. It makes sure that once a location has been assigned to some variable in some program, no other program is able to access it until the program finishes running. So now I come to the next line, line 2, and I say print full name. You see, because this full name is not in quote, Python will know that I want it to print something from the computer's memory. So it will go to the memory called full name, that section of memory called full name, read whatever is there, and it's going to print it. Let's run this program, then you understand. So I come to my terminal, I'm going to clear my screen, and then I'll say Python, and then I'll run that program again. You see, it has printed Edward Pai. Why? If you look at this code, I said store Edward Pai in some section of memory called full name, and then now I said print, go to that memory that is called full name, and then print whatever is there. So this is what happens. Before the time goes off and then we go and we rejoin, I want you to see what will happen if I put full name in quote. Okay, so if I do this, who can tell me what will happen here? Oh, please feel free. I want this to be engaging.
It will print it exactly the way.
Exactly. So
You
it
type
will, it
it.
will print full name instead of Edward Pie. Let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
So the first one, you see, when we ran it the first time, it printed Edward Pie. Now when I do this, you see, it prints full name. Why? Because you put it in quote. If it's in quote, you are telling Python that quote me, quote what I have put there. But if it's not in quote, then it knows that you are referring to somewhere in the computer's memory. So it will look for it and then it will print it for you. We are going to get even deeper after here. So the 2 minutes that is left for Zoom to go and then we have to rejoin, please feel free, ask me any question. Even if it's not about Python, anything. Maybe the whole thing I have said you didn't understand. Please feel free. I'm very passionate when I'm teaching. I want to make sure everybody gets something worth their time. So please feel free and ask any question at all. Okay, so I can assume that everybody is understanding. All right, so I'll just take a recap. Within 1 minute, we rejoin and then we continue from there. So I made mention of what is known as variables, and I said a variable. I actually didn't give you a definition, but in my mind, I know that a variable is a named location in a computer's memory where data is stored during the runtime of a program. This is not how we learn programming, okay? It's not like what is photosynthesis that you can explain. It's not science and math quiz. This thing, I learned it 14 years ago. It's still in my mind because I practice it every day. So you don't need to know how to define variable technically, but just understand that you have the ability to put your own data somewhere in the computer's RAM. This my computer has, I think, 16 gig. The operating system is using some. The text editor is using some. The terminal that I've opened is using some. Zoom is also using some. Now, I am also writing program and I have that ability. The 16 gig is very big. So all these programs are using their own. I also have the ability to put my own somewhere. Now, when I put it somewhere, I need to assign a name to it. Then, whenever I use that name in my program, it refers to the value that I stored in that somewhere of the computer. This is all there is about it.